Talk with Coach Jon Majors is underwritten by the Grady Mack Denim Company, your shop for designer denim products and other specialty clothing. Handcrafted in Tullahoma, Tennessee. GradyMackDenim.com, 931-455-1314. Also underwritten by Traders Bank, serving the Middle Tennessee area's banking needs since 1889, with locations in Tullahoma, Manchester, Winchester, and Shelbyville. At Traders, there are no strangers, just friends we haven't met yet. TradersBank.com, 931-455-3426.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and John and I are tickled to death today because we've got the living legend, Mr. Jon Majors, Coach Jon Majors, here to join us in the studio, and we're going to talk to him for a little bit today. Coach Majors, of course, a member of the College Football Hall of Fame, number 45 for the University of Tennessee. Recently had that jersey retired up there, which doesn't happen much. Coach, it's a pleasure to see you today.
Wow, I didn't know I was a living legend. You had people in Lynchburg and Huntley wouldn't believe that. They know me. They know I'm not a legend. But I do. I have been a very fortunate person, and because I grew up down the road here at Lynchburg, born and raised there. And all my family from back in the 1850s, were the Majors and the Bobos were from that area. And I moved to Huntley when I was a sophomore. But we spent more time in Tullahoma to go to the big town than any other town in the area, Fayetteville, Winchester, and Shelbyville, because my dad did a lot of barbering up here in World War II. He was owner of a barber shop in the new arcade at that time, which is no more, but the area is still here in Tullahoma. And this was where we spent more time socially to go to the movies, because we had no movies in Lynchburg at that time. And I had a lot of great friends in Tullahoma. So did my dad, and surrounding areas, but more in Tullahoma, because I used to hitchhike up here when I was a 14-year-old, approaching my freshman year in Tullahoma. I had an American Legion baseball team coached by Fred Grider, who was an outstanding man for youth.
Another legend here.
Huh?
Another legend in our
team.
He
was a terrific person. He taught us how to play baseball. My dad taught me a lot about baseball, but Fred Grider was certainly very important to me as a young person, and I got to meet had a lot of friends here: Ralph Holden, Eric Sosby, and Billy Joe Finney, and T. Motlow, who grew up down in Lynchburg. A bunch of characters, a lot of them were. Jimmy York, but I spent a lot of time up here, and I always enjoy coming back. I mean, I know this is not a speech I'm supposed to be making, but I get back to Middle Tennessee 3 or 4 times a year and spend a week at our Sewanee home, where I never lived, but we have a family home, and we go there every Christmas for about a week, and also every week, about a week, 4th of July. And I always come off to the lesser towns like Tullahoma and Shelbyville and visit some friends. You know, I kid people. Somebody will say, well, I said, where are you from? I'm from Tullahoma. Oh, I said, suburb of Lynchburg. Yeah. I said, all the folks around the surrounding area used to come to Lynchburg for their culture.
You've mentioned your dad a couple of times, and your dad tell us who your dad was.
My dad was Shirley Inman Majors. He was born in 1913, was a great athlete, and a wonderful father, and a very loyal friend, and a terrific person. And I'm not embarrassed to say, well, I'm not embarrassed at all, but I'm not going to be modest about my father. He had a lot of Tullahoma friends. He was well-known athletically, and many people said the best quail shot that ever came out of this part of the country. I've hunted with him and never was there a better one. And he also could coach football, baseball, and basketball. I'm the oldest of 5 boys, and fortunately, we were all good athletes. My dad was a superb athlete. He had speed, he could punt the ball, he could pass, he had great speed in baseball. I saw him play independent baseball and saw him play basketball. I saw him demonstrate in football and scrimmage against the Lynchburg team when he was a head coach there. And he had a very successful career. He was barbering in Tullahoma in 1944. And Lynchburg had given up football in '43, and he drove back and forth. And Joe and Bill and I'm the oldest, we'd come up about once a month and watch the movies in Tullahoma and sit around the barber shop and see him shave and give haircuts to the soldiers, and they'd get shoe shines and all that. It was very exciting times. And but in '44 they wanted to start football again, and they asked my dad to coach. They couldn't afford a coach, and many men were were 4F. Either they had to farm and couldn't go to the war because we had to have food to eat, and the soldiers did, or either they were because of health. My dad had flat feet and was turned down, and also high blood pressure at age 28 when he had 5 kids, and he started coaching the team with no pay, with no playbook, no assistant coaches, just from what he learned from his high school coach in Lynchburg in 1928, 29, and 30.
Now this was at Swanee?
That was at Lynchburg.
At Lynchburg.
He was barbering in Tullahoma. We were living in Lynchburg, and he drove back and forth to barber. And in the end of the day, he'd go and coach the football team at Lynchburg. Okay. And then he stayed there 3 years and drove back and forth to Deckard for 2 years, back when Deckard had a high school. But when they combined with Winchester to make Franklin County High School, my dad took the Huntland job. They never had football. So he took the Huntland job in '49 and drove back and forth from Huntland. He didn't want to move us the first year, even though we was the head coach there, because we had 6 kids, and Bob was just a baby. I was 14, started my freshman year. And he started there, and they won 2 games and lost 5 the first year. He had to show them how to put the uniforms on. And they never, 70% of them had never seen a football before, a football game. And the next 7 years, the Huntland Hornets won 70 games, lost 1 and tied 1. And 49, I got to tell you a little something about the 49 team. At Lynchburg, I was a starting quarterback and played some halfback, played both ways. Some principal overdid the scheduling. As a little boy, when my dad took us to Manchester and all these surrounding towns and Tullahoma to watch the high school teams play, and of course we'd see Lynchburg play, and Lynchburg never played Manchester or Shelbyville or Tullahoma. The last time I think they played one was my dad was in high school. Well, I knew that Tullahoma and Manchester and Alaska were bigger schools than we were, because I'd never seen Lynchburg play against them. My first start, I started all 10 games. My first start in '49, when I was a freshman, 14 years old, played with Manchester, and we lost the game 58-0. And I've told people I had a lot to do with the success of our team that year. I threw 3 interceptions in that first game at Manchester. We come to Tullahoma the next week. They had a big guy named, I believe, Wallace Jones, the big end. And our first string center was a senior, broke his leg. As here I'm 14 years old taking snaps. We only got beaten 75-6 against Tullahoma the second game. 65-7 at Pulaski. We won 1 game. We beat my dad's Huntland team 19-13 over at Huntland. And I scored 2 of the 3 touchdowns on an intercepted pass and a run. Beat them 19-13. And I'm the oldest of 5 boys and 1 girl. My dad said it'd be the last, he wasn't a big cursor, but he'd say the S word, some, the D word, some, but no, never used the Lord's name in vain. But he said, that'd be the last that blame time a son of mine plays against me. I'm the oldest. They moved, Daddy moves us the week of the first game. Mother says, Shirley, you've got, my mother's name was John Elizabeth, but people called her Elizabeth. And said, Shirley, you've got to move us to Huntland this week, because she said, Lynchburg will turn John in other words, because you had to have legally moved, because I played at Lynchburg the year before. We won 25 straight games. We only lost to Lynchburg. My last year, they were undefeated. And then after I left and went to Tennessee, Joe and Bill and Bob, we were all 2 years apart. 2 of us always played in the same backfield. They won 40 games and lost none and tied 1 once they got rid of me.
They won a state championship somewhere.
Well, we didn't really have state championship. We didn't have any divisions. There was no division 1, AA, or A, B, C, D. We were small schools. There was no playoffs at that time. But Huntland did reach, in the 400 and something high schools, they reached, I believe, 13th once after I got through with all the big high schools, Tullahoma and Memphis Central and Nashville Central and Nashville Isaac Litton. They did get to be 13th, which was a phenomenal happening at Huntland. And they've got a great little complex, a nice school down there, and a field named Shirley Majors football field.
Joe was a quarterback as well, so was there competition between you 2 guys?
No. We were very competitive as kids against each other, but we were also buddies. But no competition, because I was 2 years ahead of Joe, and he played some. We used a single wing. We didn't use the T formation at Huntland. And I was a tailback, and Joe played some wing back and substituted for me. He come in to tailback, moved me to wing back to throw me the ball. And when I graduated, Joe became the tailback, and Bill played 4 years as a starter. And when Joe went to Florida State, Bill became the tailback. And then when Bill graduated, Larry played 2 years for Daddy as a tailback. But we, two of us played in the backfield together always. And then Daddy went to Swanee in 1957, and Larry ended up playing for my dad at Swanee. He's the only one that ever played college ball for Daddy. I played at Tennessee, Joe played at Florida State, Bill played at Tennessee, Larry played at Sewanee, and Bob played at Tennessee.
Was it tough playing for your dad as the coach?
No. It was just demanding, and it was just like being at the house and being the son of a disciplined father who meant business, and we all figured it out and talked about it. It didn't take long to figure it out. But for me, all the way down to Bob, we were all whipped one time by our father. All he had to do was look at us. He told us what he wanted to do. We got it done. Now, Mother switched us like, because she was with us all day. We were around playing and fighting and fussing sometimes. And she'd wearing those short pants and barefooted in the summer. She'd tear off some switches and switches. I could still dance because of that, I think. But he was a wonderful father. We knew how we stood with him, and we had unconditional love. We knew what our boundaries were. We also had a lot of freedom during the daytime, and even when we became high school and college, we were able to make our own decisions, but we always asked for their counsel and their advice. My mother was a smart, intelligent woman, and well-educated. My dad never went to college, but he was a very wise, intelligent man, and had great judgment, and he could sense a phony a mile away.
Coach, what were your playing days like at Tennessee?
Well, you know, I don't know, if anybody goes to college, I don't know why they want to get out. To me, that's four of the best years of my whole life. I've been fortunate. I've lived a very good life. Growing up in Lynchburg was just absolutely wonderful. And we all had, none of us were no rich people down there. Kenny Harrison was an only child. His dad was a funeral home director. And he had all the funny books he wanted, and he was pretty stingy with them. He wouldn't let me borrow them. But and he had a new bicycle. The rest of us had second hammers. But playing football was my greatest experience, I think, ever. I loved football and basketball and baseball. That's all we had in the small towns. We didn't have tennis and golf. But as an adult, I got to where I played a lot of tennis and a lot of golf, and loved both of them. But I love a team game. Football's my favorite, and playing at Tennessee was a great experience. It was my dream since I was a little boy. I wanted to play for Army. That's where Glenn Davis and Doc Blanchard were two different Heisman Trophy winners in the same class, and didn't lose a game for 3 years at Army. They're undefeated in 44, 45, 46. And Davis won the Heisman in 45 and Blanchard in 46. I wanted to be Doc Blanchard and Glenn Davis, and the little guy, that's who I was. And I was Army. And Joe and Bill were maybe Navy or Columbia, who always got beat by Army until they would say, and I've always America when we'd play war games, and they had to be Germany or Japan, until they'd say, John, I'm not going to play if I've got to be Germany, or I'm not going to play if I can't be Army today. So I'd do anything for a game. So I'd give in occasionally. But playing college football was a great thrill, and my dream, and I had several opportunities to play. That's immodest, but I had several scholarships, even West Point, and from Florida to West Point, and as far as away as Wyoming, Arkansas, and Virginia Tech, and many others. Barry Bryant sent me, I guess, the first letter I ever received from a head coach. He was in Kentucky, and I was a sophomore or junior at Huntland. But once I got close to make my decision, I was very insecure. I was never overconfident when I started school as a first grader, or when I took my first head coaching job. I was always a worrier, afraid I wouldn't be right, afraid I couldn't do it exactly right. And I had some nightmares before I went to Tennessee. And I wanted to play there very badly, but my main goal was to make a C average, because the coach told me if I made a C average and stayed at the study hall, I could keep my scholarship for 4 years. So I did make a C average the quarter, got out of study hall. I made my grades. I wasn't an A student or summa cum laude, but I made my grades. But I love college football. I doubted I could play, but I scored a lot of points. I led the state in scoring my last 3 years of all the big schools and little schools. But I couldn't imagine those big guys up at Tennessee or Alabama missing me when I'm making a run. But I found out once I got to college in my first scrimmage, they missed me a few times. And this is it sounds maybe kind of infantile or very maybe babyish, but it wasn't. One of the most exciting days of my whole life was my first scrimmage at Tennessee, because I didn't think I could play in the big time, but I wanted to, and I was going to give it a try. I thought if I can't make it, I can always transfer to a smaller school, but I wanted to play football. And I made 3 or 4 pretty darn good runs, and the general was sitting in the stands. He just coached his last year, the year before.
Did he recruit you, John?
General Bob Naylor, he was the athletic director, but he had signed us, but he retired because of health. The February before we reported. He always came to practice. He's sitting in the stands, about 15 rows in the stands. And I made 3 or 4 pretty good runs and went to the safety man once and he tackled me, but I made about 4 or 5 people miss me. And I wasn't thinking that they had missed me. I'm thinking about the next play and going back and doing, I wasn't thinking, boy, they missed tackles here. I didn't think about it. I'm getting back and getting the next play and trying to do the best I can. That's the way I played, and that's the way I love to play. I didn't want to lose. And after the game, I ran about 5 blocks from the stadium to the local, the main hangout on campus, the Ellis and Ernest drugstore. They had a payphone. I called my dad and mother to collect in Huntland. My dad answered the phone. I said, Daddy, they missed tackles in college just like they did in high school. I couldn't believe it, but that was one of the happiest days. And I said, General Neyland asked who I was, because General didn't always pay any attention to a freshman. I'm not sure he ever called me by my name till I got to be a senior, but I did make the team, and I kept my scholarship.
So Bowden White would have been your head coach, is that correct?
Harvey Robinson.
I see.
When General Neyland retired, he signed us as a head coach and athletic director combined. And in February he retired, and he kept the whole staff. So we played for the Neyland staff, and Harvey Robinson, the offensive specialist, coached the tailbacks and the punters. He became the head coach, so we played 2 years for Coach Robinson. Unfortunately, he took, following a so-called legend like Neyland or Bryant or anybody, it's very difficult to do. But and he didn't have quite the talent that Neyland had when Neyland retired. But he was 5-5, then was 4-6, and he was fired after his second year. Then Bowden White, the great coach who was an All-American at Tennessee in 1938, and was captain, and is a Hall of Famer as a player and coach. Bowden White had been successful at Wyoming and built the program from scratch after World War II, and then moved to Arkansas, built a championship team there in 2 years, and then came to Tennessee. Fortunately, the spring practice before my junior year, and I played for him 2 years, and we had a lot of players. We had a lot of players that he inherited that were juniors and sophomores. And we went 6-3-1 his first year. He turned us around like that. He's tough, disciplined, great leader, big, fine, handsome man, and we loved him and we feared him, but we also respected him. And once you did what you were told, and you did it the right way, you felt a lot more. You felt comfortable around him because he would compliment you, but he was very demanding. And I learned so many good things about football and coaching through my dad, who was a builder at Lynchburg and at Huntland and Sewanee. Took them all 3 from low programs to championship teams. And Bowden White won championships, and the only coach in history in big-time football who's ever won 3 major championships in 3 major conferences. Wyoming was in the old Skyline, which had Arizona State, Arizona, Brigham Young, and a wonderful conference. He won the second year at Arkansas in the Southwest Conference. He won his second year at Tennessee. We went from 6-3-1 to 10-0, number 2 in the country. We were outpolled by Oklahoma. So that was great training to be a head coach.
Your senior year, you're 10-0, and you personally are runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. And of course, the gentleman that won the Heisman Trophy is Paul Hornung. but he played for Notre Dame. His team is 2-8. The only time I think that's ever happened. Did you feel like maybe you didn't get a fair deal there?
I'll say this. I never said that I thought I had an unfair deal. And also, I've never believed that I had an unfair deal. Many times, I never got myself built up for a big disappointment. Mm-hmm. And my brothers always kidded me because my mother and daddy always made certain we had a big Christmas. We didn't have any money, but we had everything we needed. We had everything. And we always had a good Christmas. Balls or helmets and our toys for the little guys. But one I don't know, when I was maybe 8 years old or 10, I came in and there was a lot of nice things spread around there, you know, and I said, "Is that all?" I mean, I was serious. And they never let me live it down until the day Joe died. He never let me live that down, Bill. But I never got myself built up too big for anything after that, because I was very pleased when I looked at what all we had after I got settled in. And Paul Hornung was a great player.
Sure.
And we were 10-0. But also, Tommy McDonald was from Oklahoma. They were 10-0 there, and he was third. And it was at that time the closest voting in history. And Jim Brown, one of the greatest players of all time, but Syracuse was fifth. And Jerry Tubbs was the center linebacker for Oklahoma. He and Tommy McDonald were teammates, and that didn't help each one of them because they had to share some votes.
Right.
But Notre Dame had the power of voting more. But Paul Hornung is one of the great football players of all time, collegiately and in pro football. He's a Hall of Famer in both of them. And we were good friends. And you're probably going to cut a lot of this stuff out. You don't need all my propaganda. But one time he came down to interview me, because I'd remember Jim Brown was fifth. And there are people that kidded Hornung at times. Hornung, Majors should have won the Heisman. Now, I didn't say that, and I never felt like that.
But he said that, didn't he, at some point?
No, I don't know what Hornung said that, but people have kidded him at times. But I never have said that, and I never believed it. But I've been quoted as saying I thought I was not treated. I never said that in my whole life. Somebody absolutely misquoted that.
Right.
But he came down to interview me. We were going to play Notre Dame when I was coaching to Tennessee in '79. Going to play him at home. And he had his own TV show at the time, so he came down and interviewed me about the Notre Dame-Tennessee game coming up and what it was like to leave Pittsburgh and leave a national championship and come to your alma mater. So it was about football. And I had it's a practice field. After practice, I had my sweatsuit on and a whistle around my neck and coaching hat, and he was interviewing me, and we've gotten through what he wanted to get through, and I thought it was about over. And he put the microphone up to my mouth, and he says, "Now, Johnny Majors, tell everybody out there in television land, all those millions of people watching us, might have been thousands, but anyway, and he says, you really thought you should have won the Heisman rather than Paul Hornung, right, in 1956? And he stuck it to me, and I said, no, Paul. I thought Jim Brown should have won it. He got me, but I got him back. So we've had a little fun.
Did that ever give you any extra motivation when you were coaching, when you played Notre Dame, that I need to beat these guys? And you were quite successful against Notre Dame.
As a head coach, we were successful against Notre Dame very much so. But I used to go to the Kentucky Derby with my brother Joe, who lived in Tullahoma, and you all knew him. He loved the races. I don't know anything about the races, but I love to go to the Derby. So I had a box for many years, and so Hornung's always there. He's a big veteran. He's lived a good life, and he's a good friend, and he's been successful, I think, quite a bit in the horses. And we went out to his house. Some of my buddies, 2 or 3 of my buddies, and some of his friends, some former pro players and Notre Dame players. Maybe there were 15 or 20 of us out there with our wives, and I just barely sat down and had a cocktail, and he had a big trophy case with this Heisman in there. He unlocked the case and brought the Heisman over, stuck it in my arms. I'm sitting there and said, "Here, boy, you thought you should have had it. Here it is."
Take a pic.
He'd always get me. It's hard to get ahead of Hornung, but he was a great player, truly a great player.
Well, Coach, what did you think about the Heisman decisions this year, with the first time a freshman was in the running for that, or at least winning it?
You know, I wonder how good can they get? I mean, you keep wondering in the Olympics, and when are they going to hit the wall? You think, well, they can't run less than what they're running, 100 meters. And I don't know how to compare that exactly. I got a good idea, but I had to compare it to the 100-yard dash that we used to run. But how good can they get? You think in the last 3 or 4 years, when I saw Tebow play for Florida, I said, give me Tebow all my career. That's all I need. Now, I've had some players in all respect that I liked as quarterbacks and did a great job. But give me a Tebow. That's all I ask. Somebody, I like to be able to run options where a quarterback can move and run. He's big. He has speed. He has power. He could throw very well. Very good college thrower. And then the kid coming along with Cam Newton, who's a man among kids. He's 6'5" or 6" and 260. For crying out loud, I thought, my goodness, I thought Tebow, I'll take Cam Newton the rest of my life if I make a comeback. And then you have this now it's now
RG3.
Yeah, but what's his full name? The freshman.
Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel for A&M. Here's a guy that's a freshman redshirt, young man, 6'1", and I believe he weighs about 225 or 30. And for crying out loud, he probably runs a 4.40. He can run, he can pass, he can throw it through a needle. And I'm thinking, yes.
And he beat Alabama.
Yeah, and he beat Alabama.
He beat Alabama.
Well, he and the team, but he was the main reason they did it. Now, from that standpoint, if you go give it to the best player, who's the most valuable player in the country, to his team, and the best player, yes, I think he should have gotten it. I really do. I think I would have voted for him if I had a vote, because that's the way the rules, I don't know the exact rules, but that's what it says. So he's the best player, in my opinion. The Notre Dame linebacker is evidently a great player, but the A&M quarterback has more to do that affects the game than a linebacker does.
You know, and we were talking about Notre Dame the school itself having an effect when you were in that running for the Heisman, and we saw that again in later years when Peyton Manning at Tennessee did not win the Heisman, and it was won by Defensive Player that year. Do you feel like that if you're the quarterback, you've got more responsibilities, there's more athletic ability required and more mental ability than perhaps if you're a defensive player?
Well, he's involved with every play. I mean, every play, the center and the quarterback are touching the ball.
Right.
Nobody else does that. But one thing about the Michigan Heisman Trophy winner that won over Manning, he did play both ways, and that was something very few people, very rarely were doing when he won it. So he was a two-way player, and he was valuable as a receiver and running reverses and also returning punts and kickoffs. So he was a double team. He's one like the 60. He wasn't a 60-minute man, but when we played both ways.
Right.
Single platoon football, offense and defense, full time. He didn't play it full time, but he was involved a lot more than just a regular linebacker or a regular defensive back would be.
Players today are much bigger than they were when you played. How much did you weigh when you were in college?
Well, the most I ever weighed was 168 my senior year. I wanted to be 170 in the worst way. I thought that sounded a lot bigger. But again, I mean, I'm amazed. How big can they get, and how fast can they run? I'm saying things that hasn't been done before. It's all relative. It's according to who's the best at that particular time. Red Grange, back in 1927-20, is one of the greatest runners of all time. You see his films now. He still looked great. I'm not sure he couldn't play today if he was maybe not at age 65 or 70 when he died, but he was fabulous. But these people today are so big, and I don't know how they get there. A lot of them don't eat the exact diet. A lot of them eat the burgers and a lot of fat food and grew up on soul food with black kids, and a lot of we grew up on what they call soul food today, and that's still my favorite food is a vegetable lunch or a vegetable dinner. But turnip greens and turnips and beans and cornbread and but they're just, and I don't think a lot of the young kids are on steroids.
Well, Coach, don't you think that I know when I played Tullahoma in the late 60s, we had very little or no weight training.
No.
And now these kids in junior high and high school, the high schools are doing a great job in bringing these kids up in their strength and their speed programs.
There's no question about that. And I think certain things that maybe when they're in their mother's womb, I think that maybe the treatment that doctors give them,
right.
maybe things like that give them a better start in life. But I don't know enough about that. I could confuse you real quickly and confuse myself. But it's like the article in the Nashville Tennessean about 3 days ago about the three big brothers and going to MBA, and their father played at Notre Dame, maybe at 6'3", 230. And now one of those boys is like 6'6", 280, and another one's like 6'5", 270, and the other one, I believe the junior in high school, he's a huge, they're all three huge, but their mother's about 5'10", and she was an athlete in college. So you think, I guess just a lot of it is marrying bigger people, and people are getting bigger all over. I just don't know how big they can get, and it's amazing. That's enough for me to say because I'm going to confuse myself.
Well, you know, Coach, there was a point, and it might have been General Neyland. It might have been something else going on at Tennessee that caused you to make that decision to go there. And Tennessee has turned throughout the years into being a wonderful program. We've had some coaching difficulties as of late. I know you. How many years did you coach in Knoxville?
16 years.
And then Phil Fulmer coached about that long.
16,
16 as well.
They gave him credit for 16, but he really wasn't the football head coach. And here's the difference between Notre Dame and Tennessee: the administration. When Lou Holtz was coaching Notre Dame, he missed 1 or 2 games, and his assistant took over. But the administration, they won. The administration gave Lou Holtz the credit on his record.
Right, okay.
When I missed the first 3 games, it was not my team. My dad never said my team. My dad never said it was our team or the Sewanee team. And it is our men, our team, the Tennessee team. It belongs to the state of Tennessee and the people and the university. I never said my players or my players did this. And I don't like to see coaches use that term, my players or my staff. And when we won the first 3 games, and I missed the first 3, I'd been coaching there for 14 years or so. And we prepared the team in spring practice and year round, and I was involved with 2-a-day practices till I had my heart surgery. And to the day, if I'd have waited to 24 hours, I'd probably still be head coach there, and we'd still be winning championships. I was there 16 years, and the program didn't just go down under Derek Dooley. Derek Dooley took over the toughest job, and so did Lane Kiffin, the toughest job since I went there in 1977. Tennessee had not been to a major BCS Bowl game for about 5 years before Kiffin came in. Keep that in mind. He inherited a tough job because they'd lost two losing seasons out of the last 3 before Kiffin came to town. Kiffin would have won there. He can win. But Dooley was left in a tougher situation, a little bit more than Kiffin, because some of Kiffin's highly touted recruits either were thrown out of school or had a discipline problem with the law or whatever, and didn't work out. And Dooley took the toughest job probably of anybody since I came there in '77. And it didn't work out for him. And I think the new man, they got, probably they did as well as they could do. And I'm impressed with what Dave Hart did about going through the selection and pursuing and recruiting a head coach. And I haven't met the head coach. I called him once. I said, I know you're busy, and he's returned. He's called me back twice with a message, and we talked. And all as busy as he is, I got a text yesterday wishing me Merry Christmas on the 25th, which is Christmas Day. And I like what I read about him. I like what I hear about him. He has had championships. He's won in 2 different jobs. And he talks, I think, like Tennessee people can understand. And he sounds like he means business and is sincere, and not a lot of eyewash out there to cover a fast talker. I think he's probably a good fit for Tennessee under the circumstances at this time, and he does have a very challenging job ahead of him. I know what it's like to be in jobs like that at Iowa State and Pittsburgh and Tennessee. To build it up is not easy. It takes coaching, it takes recruiting, it takes teamwork, and it takes people contributing to the program to improve your facilities, even though Tennessee's facilities are first class pretty much in every way.
And so, that wasn't necessarily the case when you came there the first time.
No, when I came to Tennessee, I had to do a lot of the hustling to get to the. We were big, but we were old. Mm-hmm. Alabama and Georgia and Florida State and Oklahoma, I traveled around and took 2 board members about 1987 to show them what was happening, but I couldn't get the administration to do anything about it at that time. They came back and told the administration to build us a new football complex and an indoor football field. Joe Johnson, the president at that time, vice president, says, "Johnny, we don't need an indoor football field in Tennessee." I said, "Well, they're building one at Alabama and at Georgia, and best I ever call in my geography lessons that they're south of Tennessee. So we have colder weather up here where we were."
Exactly.
And we built a beautiful new complex in 1988, and now they've almost doubled it, because you've got to have the facilities to compete with other people and to be able to work in the best conditions possible.
You know, you mentioned a moment ago about you thought Coach Kiffin could have been successful at UT. Certainly a lot of people were disappointed, very mad when he left to go to Southern Cal, but he said that was his dream job. You came off of winning the national championship at Pittsburgh and the next year moved to Tennessee. Do you understand better what Lane Kiffin went through because of that?
I certainly understand 100%. Lane Kiffin wasn't a traitor. Tennessee's been pretty spoiled. Mm-hmm. They've never lost a coach before. They got rid of me after I had the 3 best years of my entire career.
I was going to say, I didn't want to go there unless you wanted to. But you won 30 games the previous 3 years.
We went to 3 major bowl games my last 3 years, and that was the Sugar and won it. We were champions and beat, the Cotton. That was when the Cotton Bowl was one of the top 5 bowls in the country, mm-hmm. before the BCS. We beat Arkansas, the championship team in the Southwest, in the Cotton Bowl. The next year we beat Virginia. They were champions of the Atlantic Coast Conference. In the Sugar Bowl, we were champions. The next year we went to the Fiesta. Those last 2 I mentioned, Sugar and Fiesta, are BCS games. We lost to Penn State. The next year, 8-3 my last year. 8-3, I was shut out the door and pushed out without being warned. And we were 8-3. That was in the 3 prior years were the best 3 years in my entire 29 years of coaching, back to back. Best 3 years of my mm-hmm. career. So
11-1 one year, I think.
Yes. So that's something I think I can move on from here. But I am really not a bitter person, but I dang sure if it's brought up, I'm going to darn sure express what I think about it.
Exactly.
Because I had no warning, and it was just disloyalty on the part of some people I worked for.
Coach, with the with the new coach coming in, I know there was a lot of talk and chatter. Now you've got the internet, and these people everybody's back and forth, and you get a lot of input about why Tennessee couldn't get a ranked big name coach to move from where they were already successful here. What's it like today coaching in the SEC, which is probably the most powerful conference in the country?
Then we'll go right back to that, but one thing I didn't quite complete. That Lane Kiffin going to Southern Cal, Tennessee is something I wanted to come back to for years and years, but it was the worst time that I could have been called when we were champions in the whole country. Number 1, 12-0, and it's the only undefeated team in the country. And to be number 1, I've said this to many people, and I've said it publicly, so I'm going to say it here. But I'm here in my home area right here. I wanted to stay more than I wanted to come to Tennessee, because we had it going. Mm-hmm. Jackie Sherrill, everybody that followed me, whether it was Earl Bruce at Iowa State had success, we left the program as a program, strong, better program. By far than when I took it over. Jackie Sherrill won at Pittsburgh after I came here. He didn't take my job. If Jackie Sherwood had been my top assistant at Tennessee, I'd still be head coach there. He was assistant head coach at Iowa State and Pittsburgh. And but Lane Kiffin took the Southern Cal job, which is probably one of the top, no question, it's one of the top 5 jobs in America. Tennessee's a great job, but Tennessee maybe about 15th to 20th compared to Notre Dame and Penn State and Oklahoma and Texas and Southern Cal is a dream job. And he lived in California more. He never lived in Tennessee. And he went to school at and graduated at not San Jose State, but anyway, they won the bowl game this past week. But he played football out there in California, and he'd been an assistant there. So it makes I can see why he'd go. But Tennessee had never lost a coach before. They'd gotten Bowden White from Arkansas to come here, and got me from Pittsburgh to come here. As I said, I wanted to stay more than I wanted to come because I knew this was going to be challenging and people would expect more than I could produce earlier probably. But I'd always have wondered what it would have been like to have coached my alma mater. Some of that is ego.
Yeah.
Some of it is a challenge, and some of it's a prideful challenge to say, I want to get this done for my alma mater. But also a lot of it is ego and personal satisfaction of doing it if you can to get it done. But Kiffin had every reason to make his own decision.
You know, Coach, with the tough times we've had at Tennessee lately, a lot of us diehard Vol fans, we look for those positive things that we can remember and talk about when we get together. And I think one of those things is your victory over Miami in the 1985 Sugar Bowl. Miami was cocky, and I think their coach was one of your former assistants. You know, they're running that mouth, and everybody. I think you're an 8-point underdog. You go down there and you dominate that game.
Here I'm going backwards. I'll probably wear the audience out. But you mentioned before about coaching in the SEC and the challenge of it. There were 2 jobs that, well, I'd probably want either one of them, but I've told people I would not want to have been in Dave Hart's shoes. He took over a tough job at the University of Tennessee when they're combining to all sports and having to let some people go. He's had a really tough time to come into, and with the money being down, contributions being down, season tickets being down, and got to try to build that back up, the reserve and support the athletic program overall. But he did a good job overall. He's talking about some people talking about not hiring a really top, well-known coach. I'll say this: when they listed about 8 people, the Knoxville papers did, that thought that Tennessee might be interested in or thought it might be good catches. And they talked about the Oklahoma State coach. I imagine he was approached, but I don't know. I don't stick my nose in unless I'm asked for something. He's been supported by T. Boone Pickens, who gave over $1 billion to the football and athletic program. And I'd say that'd be hard to hire him since he was an alumnus, even though I was an alumnus and left. But I came back to my alma mater, but he was at his alma mater, the Oklahoma State coach. And as I mentioned about Gary Patterson, I don't know what he was talking to, TCU. He's done a great job. They're built millions of dollars. He's raised a lot of money there, just like I had to when I came to Tennessee, to try to get it more modern. And he's done a very good job, a wonderful coach. And 2 or 3 more that I can't think right now, but
John Gruden had a good job.
John Gruden, when the people mentioned him earlier, how many times do you see a head coach in the pros who's left the head coach and goes into the booth and makes several $1 million doing that? They get kind of warmer in there, and you don't have to spend Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night at the office like you do in college football, right. and no recruiting and no faculty. And I enjoyed a lot of the faculty. I had a lot of friends, but dealing with the faculty, recruiting, and also academics. They don't have to do any of that. It's strictly football all the time. You don't see John Gruden going back to pro football yet. You don't see Bill Cowher going back. You don't see Jimmy Johnson going back, much less college football.
Right.
The only couple you see that are going back to college football are Steve Spurrier who didn't do very well at the Washington Redskins, but he's a very outstanding coach as a college coach. He's done well on his return. He did well before. And the coach that got fired at Atlanta Falcons, Mora, who did well at UCLA, but they were looking for a job, I would say, and they did very well. So I didn't think it was very realistic to get John Gruden. We were very close, but I didn't call him. He didn't call me.
You know, a lot of these conferences where these coaches coach in, you know, they're playing 3, maybe 4 games a year that are really, really, really tough football games. In the SEC, you're playing every week just about for the championship. You know, you lose 1 ball game here or 2, you're pretty much out of the picture.
You asked that question earlier about the SEC coaching in the SEC today. The Southeastern Conference has always been one of the toughest, and quite often the toughest, even though the Big Ten has had its days, and they're not over, I don't imagine. And the Pac-10 out in the West Coast have had their great days. But the Southeastern Conference, to no question, has the best speed and the best quickness throughout the country of any other conference, and some normally outstanding coaching. Tennessee, the Southeastern Conference, has normally had a lot of very good defensive coaches throughout history, going back to Neyland's time and Barry Bryant. And we stressed kicking and we stressed defense. I also like working on offense. But right now, when you got Alabama and you have Georgia and you have Florida and you have Louisiana State, 4 of the top 10 jobs in America without question. I mean, they can recruit in those states more than we can in our own state. We have good players in Tennessee, but not the numbers they have there.
Right.
And they have an outstanding selection from African American athletes throughout those states. The population is larger for the African Americans than it is in Tennessee. So there's some advantages, and this is challenging. Fortunately, we've been able to go nationally more than some of those deep southern states, and that's the reason Tennessee has had success, is because of getting the best in the state that we get, trying to keep them here, and recruiting nationally where we can go to, because we're in the right of the center of the eastern part of the United States. So we're around the biggest population in the whole country, right at Knoxville, Tennessee. Gatlinburg and the Smoky Mountains are the biggest, heaviest visited national park in America.
You were sort of the leader in starting a lot of that reaching out past the state. I know you recruited more and further out seemingly than a lot of the coaches before you had done.
Yes, we were. Even though General Neyland always had some players from West Virginia, George Cavigo and Dick Huffman, 2 of the greatest players of all time there. But West Virginia doesn't have an abundance. But Tennessee, even before I went there, and in the late 30s, they had people from Pennsylvania, not a large number. We always had some good players from Virginia, and we always had 2 or 3 from New Jersey playing, and Delaware maybe, and Connecticut. And, Gordon Pulaski's and many others came from some of those eastern states, and some great players came from the northeast part of the country. But we started going further in the junior colleges when we needed a replacement. 2 of those teams in '89, '99, and when we recruited junior colleges very hard because we needed defensive people. Great safety man we had, Dale Carter, junior college, and Chris Mims, junior college, and Chuck Smith, great defensive outside linebacker, all played pro football and were great ones. So we hit the junior college more than Tennessee had ever done before. Plus we went further west to California, right. But I think we were the first coaching staff that probably went into California. So we did more to spread it further. Neyland always did some national recruiting too, but not as far as we did.
Did you ever think you'd see the day when college football coaches, head football coaches, are making the kind of money that they are making today? Not that they're not worth it.
I've already said, when are they going to hit the wall? And speed and size and strength and quickness, all combined. And no, the money, I couldn't even imagine it. Tennessee, they were pretty tight with what they let out. When I was coaching at Tennessee, I was the 5th highest paid coach in the conference, and we were the winningest team in the conference my last 5 years. So Bill Curry at Kentucky got paid more than I did. So that's
kind of hard to believe.
That tells you how the administration felt about the football and basketball coach. They felt like we could always get a coach.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're not all the same.
No.
You can always get a coach.
No, they're certainly not.
You know, we kind of we got off kilter, got out of sequence there, but I asked you a moment ago about the 85 Sugar Bowl.
Oh, yeah, Sugar Bowl.
You had a...
Well, frankly speaking, that's one of my biggest surprises of my life. When we go down to Jimmy Johnson got, I think, #2 team in the country, and they were loaded, and we had a good football team, of course. I think the 85 team at the University of Tennessee, I've never believed in saying give 101% or give 110%. I think when you give 100% or when you get 100% of anything, that's as much as you can get. And I've said just give it 100%, give it all you got. And okay, the question.
Well, you guys went in there and dominated that game.
Well, that 85 team did. I think they extended themselves and got the maximum out of their talents, as much or more than any team I've ever been, because we overcame some adversity. And you think about it, we didn't have that many pro players. You think Havanek was a good defensive tackle, and Dale Jones, one of the best players I ever had, didn't play a down of pro football. And we had about six really good defensive backs. And that's really, we confused Miami and Testaverde. We 6 in and 5 in, and we stunt and fake. I mean, blitz from the secondary.
He had a horrible day that day.
Well, yeah, well, it's one of those days, and those staffs. I've said I don't believe I've ever had a better game plan. As a staff, I use the word I, but that gives the credit to the staff of the offense and defense. Walt Harris was the offensive coordinator, Ken Donahue the defensive coordinator, and Ron Zook had a lot to do with the secondary play. It was but those are 2 of the best game plans by both sides of any one. As great a game as any game plans have ever been made for that I've been involved with as a head coach. And that team lost the best talented quarterback I've ever coached in my life, Tony Robinson, at the Alabama game. And Darrell Dickey had hardly played a down and goes in cold off the bench when Tony gets hurt. And the first stop pattern he throws, he hits an Alabama linebacker right in the chest, right in front of me. He got a clear shot, and the guy dropped it. Big break. And Dale Jones made that great interception. But we had some other people. Keith Davis was hurt for a while, really good running back. We lost some injuries that were real key. But I used to have a saying, when your number is called, be ready. You never know when the first team man goes down or the second team man, and you may be the third teamer. That team, I think, exemplified that better than any other team I've ever had, where when your number's called, come to the front. It was a tremendous team without a lot of great pro players, and I was pretty surprised about the score. I'll be frank with you, because I thought we could lose 40-7. I wasn't expecting it, but I knew realistically that we could lose pretty badly with as good as that team was.
I tell you who was more surprised than you were.
Yeah, I know
were the announcers, because when the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, they're still saying now it's Testaverde still got time.
Yeah, or they kept Dickey kept throwing this little out pattern, and they kept saying they're going to catch on to this. This is not going to work. And then you had the running back Jeff Powell, I think, who broke a long one, and he hadn't played a lot, I don't think, that year.
He transferred. He played only 1 year. He transferred from a school up in Virginia. I don't know the name of it, but he transferred to run track. Put him on scholarship after he had a good scrimmage, the last scrimmage of the season. I put him on scholarship, and he paid for every bit of it. He hadn't played that much at all, but he had great speed, and it was just a great team effort. Talking about the game plan. The game plan doesn't work if the players don't execute it. So players win games, as people say. But it was a greatly coached team by the defense and offensive staff, and greatly played by our team. And the fans had a lot to do with it. We had 80% of the fans in the stadium. It was a very exciting week to be down there with all those Tennessees walking.
I remember John mentioned the announcers really didn't get it, and I think one of them was Bud Wilkerson, who's a great guy. But I kept thinking somebody needs to call Bud up and tell him Tennessee's winning this game, Bud.
It's over with, Bud.
I believe that was Keith Jackson and Frank Broyles, I believe.
Frank Broyles, you're exactly right.
And Frank
is the one that kept saying.
Frank's a very smart man, and I really respect him greatly because I worked for him 4 years. And Jimmy Johnson was the starting nose man my first year when we won the national championship, and he played for Frank Broyles and coached for him later on in his career. But I think Jimmy Johnson was probably pretty surprised about that too. I know Jon Majors was, but Frank Broyles said that was one of the best prepared game teams he'd ever seen. And Keith Jackson, they did the game, play-by-play, and Broyles did the color. And I think they were pretty surprised too. But you know, I've been surprised myself both ways. But that's one of those good surprises.
Coach Majors, I think we asked Coach Majors for a 10 or 15 minute interview. We've probably run it longer than that. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. But I've got one more question though I want to ask. You said, and I read it somewhere years ago, that the best recruit I ever got was Mary Lynn. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, best recruit, yeah, that's the best recruiting job I ever did was when I called my future wife for a blind date. I'd seen her in the student union when she was a freshman, and I was a freshman coach. Called her, and she thought she was dating my brother Bill, who was a freshman also, who I was coaching as a freshman coach. And yeah, Mary Lynn's been a wonderful wife and great support, and a wonderful mother. So that's where you got to start in the life once you get out of college. And as I said earlier, I don't know why anybody want to get out of college. It's one of the greatest 4 years of your life, but I've been fortunate through the years and had a lot of good times, a few bad times, but a lot of good ones.
I guess that must be why it took me about 6 to get out.
It takes a lot of people that long. They just don't want to give it up. I think our producer of this show, Philip Scoggins, spent 8 years in college. We're not sure, but anyway.
Well, I say this, I've been very fortunate to have lived a very good life, and I've had no reason not to be as good as I could be, because how good that is or not. And I'm not the one to judge. But I've had a lot of excitement in my life, and it goes back to having a family that gave us unconditional love. And we had a lot of great support in our friends and family friends in Lynchburg and Hutland, where we grew up. And of course, we had friends in this area up here that were supportive of my dad and my mother and us through the years. And I always enjoyed coming home, so to speak. Coming back to Tennessee was not easy when I came back as head coach, but I've always loved the state of Tennessee. I'm not a real fan of some of the political goings on in this state, but that's something for another subject. So I'm pretty well, I think, a progressive moderate, and I'm very concerned. But anyway, this is a great state and has a lot of great people in it.
Coach Majors, thank you so much. We've absolutely enjoyed it.
Appreciate you,
Thank you so much. You're always welcome back anytime, because there are at least 3 more days worth of conversations we could have about your career.
Well, I tell you what, I'll probably be censored after this long dissertation here.
Absolutely.
Or whatever you call it.
Absolutely not.
No, sir.
No, absolutely not. You rank right up there at the top of all the big stars that we've ever had on this show. Thank you so much.
Good to be here. Happy New Year, everybody.
That's right. Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year.
A Talk with Coach Jon Majors is underwritten by the Grady Mac Denim Company, your shop for designer denim products and other specialty clothing. Handcrafted in Tullahoma, Tennessee. GradyMacDenim.com, 931-455-1314. Also underwritten by Traders Bank, serving the Middle Tennessee area's banking needs since 1889, with locations in Tullahoma, Manchester, Winchester, and Shelbyville. At Traders, there are no strangers, just friends we haven't met yet. TradersBank.com, 931-455-3426.